All right, so let's take a look at using async task to solve the problem that we've been working on. So first thing I want to do is add a new class. Okay, I'm just going to call this my async task worker. And what I have to do is extend the built-in async class. Now, as we mentioned, async task is parameterized, so I'm going to have to give it a series of parameters. So, first parameter is what information do I want to pass into it? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass into it a text view. I'm going to pass in the text view that I would like it to update. The next thing I have to identify is what kind of information will I pass from the background thread to the updates to specify what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and pass a string for that. And the last thing I need to do is what data type I'm going to use from the background task to identify to on post execute how it went. And so for that I'm going to use a boolean. Okay, so now with that I've got the class described. So the next thing I need to do is actually implement some of the methods. So now the only method I'm required to implement is do in background. But I want to actually implement two others. I want to be able to provide progress updates. All right, so I'm going to override another method. So I'm going to take the on progress update. And I also want to do the on post execute, again, so I can keep giving information to the user. And so now you'll notice here that do in background receives a parameter, which is the text view. It's going to receive an array of text views. Right. On progress update receives the strings, and then on post execute receives a boolean telling us, and you'll notice that that boolean is also the return value from do in background. Again, that identifies how the processing went. So what we're going to do here now is go back into our activity. I'm going to take all this code here that we had inside of our worker thread. I'm going to take that and put it into that new class we've created. So I'm going to cut that away. This just asked me about imports I need, so I say go ahead and bring those imports in. So we'll do that. And so basically here now, I'm going to get rid of all this code I had here. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use that async task worker. All right, so let's get rid of these extra variables we created to deal with our threading problem. And now let's create a variable for async task worker. Because we've now got that there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do work, async task worker. I'm going to create a new instance of our class. And then what I want to call is the base class's execute method. And the execute, if you remember that, we said whatever we pass as this first parameter up here. So it's a text view. So what I want to do is pass in the text view I want to update. Right, which of course is my default text view. That's the guy I want to actually update on the user interface. In fact, this update display function, we can get rid of this guy as well. So now what happens is when I pass that text view in, right, it gets passed into our do in background back here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and save a reference to that. So I've got that, so I'll just go ahead and store it. Because this is a variables parameter list, it comes in as an array. So I just want the first one because I know I'm only passing one. In fact, to be really careful, what I should probably do is just do something like, well, if and the length is greater than 0. Right? I don't want to do that if I actually had something to save. Right? Now, as you remember that we needed a context for this to create this, well, it turns out that all the controls on an activity can get their context. So I'm going to grab that now from him. All right, so I've got that in place. And now remember that we're not going to call this update display. That was a function we had to create all the time. Remember, though, that there was something called publish progress. Right? And its parameter type is whatever our second specified generic parameter here, which is string. And what that does is now every time we call publish progress, it's going to call our onProgressUpdate for us in a thread-safe way. So we call publishProgress on the async task base class. It makes a thread-safe call to onProgressUpdate for us. So basically, we're going to replace all those update display calls with that. All right, and then what this becomes is just to call our text view that we've stored, setText. And we're going to pass in values sub 0, again, because it's a variable length parameter list. So we've got that there. So now the only thing left to really deal with is our onPostExecute here. And remember that this guy is returning, doing background returns a Boolean. That whatever we return from this is what gets passed into here. Right? So if we take a look here, I'm going to create a return value. So I'm going to set that equal to false. Say we'll assume that things went bad. And then we'll return that as our function return. Right, and if you look here, is that I only checked that array length for this one assignment. Well, the reality is that if I don't have anything in that array, all kinds of things are going to break. So I really should do is make this a blocked if. And so now I'm only going to do all that work in there if I actually received a valid text view. So what I'll say then is that, well, if I got the valid parameters and everything worked, then I'll set return value to be true. And with that, then my onPostExecute, I can do something intelligent in terms of what I actually display. Right? As I can say, well, something like, well, if a Boolean, the value, if that's true, that means things succeeded, right? So I'll say then my text view, set text, done, else my text view, set text, error. Right, so we've got it all together. So then the neat thing about this is that I didn't have to do all the work myself to figure out the thread switching. The only thing I was responsible to do is say, well, things I want to do on the background thread, I'm going to write inside this do in background function. Anytime I want to update the user interface, I'll call publishProgress, and I'll return a return value that says how it went. The base class async task guarantees that these other methods always run in a UI safe way. I wasn't creating all those extra variables to store things. The base class is actually guaranteeing that things occur in the specified order. So it really simplifies all that work I was doing manually before with the explicit thread. It also takes advantage of pooled threads, so that if I'm using this thing over and over again, it's efficiently reusing resources that have been allocated. Okay, so if we go ahead and run this guy again, so we can see what it looks like. Go ahead and launch it. Okay, we click on our menu, do work. We see starting, retrieve location, retrieved address, done. Just like we got last time. The key thing is that we weren't doing all that extra work. We were able to kind of just focus our work inside the do in background and then provide our user interface update tasks.